Hello, everybody. This is John Arnold, and I am back with another podcast session. And of course, by my side, my trusty colleague, Chris. All right, Chris, give a big hello for everyone out there. Chris Fine.
Hi, everyone. Hi, John. Great to be here again.
Okay, I agree. We are two smart, independent analysts out there doing our consulting work, so to speak, but we do see a lot of interesting things. And if you were with us last segment, Chris talked about the CoreTech, a real estate event that opens up a lot of eyes for how, the people who design office buildings and office spaces are starting to be part of the conversation and need to be when you start thinking about some of the technologies that we look at here in the collaboration and communication space. So that's one we could have gone on a lot longer for, Chris, right? This is brave new world we're looking at, but a lot of exciting possibilities, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. But one of the changes we didn't talk about last time, which I think is the focus of today, is the advances in office and enterprise technology that are part of this, particularly in end-user technology. And John, I think you've got an event coming up at the end of January about the future of work. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. And I'm sure it ties into all the other themes you and I have been covering over the past few months.
Yeah, thanks. It sure does. And, we tend to talk about events that we have already been to on these podcasts. So we're recapping what we saw. But this one, I think appropriately, since it is about the future of work, we will talk about what I think that event is going to look like. I'm the co-chair of the event, so I have my kind of fingers in every slice of the pie here in terms of all of the sessions and speakers that we're dealing with. So yeah, I think this is, a typical kind of conference that is looking at the emerging workspace, workplace environment where technology, really digital transformation, which goes beyond just technology, of course, is really shaping the way everything gets done. So, much the way we went through transformations in the analog world with music and film, et cetera, the way we experience these things is now really showing up in the world of work. So this particular event is a sub-event of the IT Expo, which I would be happy to say is celebrating its 20th year this year. So it's a big milestone. And just a quick hat tip to them, because I can't think of too many events, Chris, that have persevered this long in this space. I can't think of too many at all, actually. We've both come through, the Jeff Pulver years and many other events like Supercom, they've come, they've gone and come back, but IT Expo has stayed in the game all this time. So hats off to them. Of course, they keep evolving and trying to, hit the mark and stay relevant. So the way they do that is with these sub-events that I think both you and I have been involved in over the years. And this new one is really trying to, tackle that emerging space that I've just been talking about and that you have been seeing a lot about at that recent conference. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what I expect is going to be happening, and I think that will be of interest to our listeners here. Of course, if time allows and this podcast lines up before the event in enough time, this might help you make a decision to actually attend the event, which would be wonderful. But more importantly, there's a lot we can learn even if you don't go to the show. So before I talk about that a little bit, I just want to get some thoughts from you, Chris, on what you think the future means in terms of the workplace. Are we going into a world where people are going to be working less and less independently and be really, interconnected in everything they do? Or are the kind of traditional ways of working that we've grown up with, is that still going to persist?
I think it's going to evolve, John. And I think there are several aspects to it. I also think there is certainly an overlap, but a distinction between the future of the workplace and the future of work. Because the future of work is actually a bigger topic, because work doesn't only take place in the workplace, and there are many, many, many different types of work. And so, and you tell me whether this matches your thinking. When I think of the future of work, I see the evolution really past kind of the industrial age model of work that morphed into the 20th century model of the corporation and the office and work tasks. And I see things being much more fluid, much less hierarchical, flatter organizations, more collaboration, more team oriented versus organizationally oriented, if you want to call it that. And I think a key enabler of all of that is going to be technology, which I think is what you're going to be talking about, right?
Yeah, a lot of a lot of flavors of technology for sure. And the reason why I think this event is important to talk about is, for those of us who've come out of the analog world, when you think about how long it took for things like VoIP to become kind of mainstream, it came out really, I think, in 95. So here we are 20 plus years later, and it's still, it has not completely replaced legacy telephony. Think about how long wireless has taken to get to where it is. And, there is an excitement around things like AI because it's kind of here and people think it's just going to shift everything overnight. But these big technologies, as we know, take many, many years to diffuse themselves into the mainstream and kind of filter into our daily lives. It's happening faster today for sure. But, I think having lived through all this, I think we have to be a little more realistic about how long these cycles take.
First of all, the cycle of changes in work content is already beginning. It's already in progress, but where it's going to get kickstarted by things like robotic process automation and AI. And so it's really an open question of where it all goes, John, right? Because do you end up having most jobs based on very high level skills and the rest being automated? And if that's the case, what happens to a lot of the workforce? Or do you just have a more traditional assignment of multiple skills and multiple specialties throughout the workforce, and they're just better connected and maybe saved from very monotonous, repetitive work? And those two scenarios reflect what one reads between what the tech folks tend to think, which are the latter, that you'll be freed from menial tasks, and where others may think more on the sociological or economic level of a displacement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's easy to forget, with all the hype around AI that, oh boy, it's here, it's going to be our salvation. But when you look under the hood, I mean, just like things like VoIP, AI has been a work in progress for almost 50 years. I mean, this is not something that people just started thinking about 5 years ago. So as I said about that diffusion, it takes a long time. So we're going to reap the benefits of that kind of long lead up of trial and error. And it's probably been more error than success, but it's becoming the opposite now. And I think, one of the themes that will come out of this conference is that issue, as you mentioned, about automation and will AI and robotics, et cetera, become complements to the workforce or competition for our jobs? And obviously there's going to be a little of both. And those are the issues we have to obviously, we can't ignore, and we have to bring AI along in a responsible way. And we're going to hear quite a bit about this at the conference. First of all, the potential impact of AI on the workforce itself, but then the more granular stuff about its role in collaboration, in voice communications, in team collaboration applications like conferencing. How the scale of this in the small business is easy to see, but when you get into an enterprise, it's more complicated because you have infrastructures to deal with in terms of supporting it. And you start spreading it out into things like sales and marketing. And we do see some of this already, but the overlap now between contact center space and customer care and what goes on in the enterprise becomes a very rich environment for AI applications. So just as it can be helpful in the office, in the enterprise environment to make workflows more efficient. AI has obviously got a big opportunity in the customer experience space to really help with making interactions with customer agents more effective, and of course automating forms of customer service. And there's opportunity here because AI brings a lot to the table we couldn't do before, that can make for, personalized experiences, because it can cull information from many sources, without lifting a finger, that can empower agents to have very deep, richer engagements with customers that have better results. And that's a real kind of nirvana that companies are looking for. So AI is kind of held up there a bit as a shiny ball that can do a lot of things. And I think we'll get there eventually. And that's a big part of what we're going to look at this event. But we're still at the early stages, as you know, Chris. I mean, you and I see this all day long, but for a lot of, for people who are just getting their feet into this, AI is still a fairly new concept. So you can't assume a level of knowledge here that everyone can just run with. So as with any good conference, we have to have a bit of a 101 level introduction to make sure people know what we're talking about, the ground rules and the expectations and the mechanics of the technologies themselves, because it is pretty complex. And that's another thing I'll just mention before I come back to you, that AI is a very amorphous concept, right? Just like the term UC, unified communications, it can mean so many things. And there's a danger of having like a bit of a misplaced hope on something that you don't understand. And AI has a lot of potential to work well, but it has a lot of potential to fall short. So you can't just automatically assume it's going to be our savior just because it can do things, faster than we can. It's not ready yet to do things better than we can. So there's a lot of kind of give and take here that we have to roll with to make this really a successful, new form of doing things.
I agree, John. I also think, your last point actually led me to what I had been meaning to jump in and say, which is there are many different levels of AI. And I think that, one perspective when we look into the office is there's sort of micro AI and macro AI.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these are terms of art. I just sort of thought of them, but micro AI to me is something like increasing the accuracy of spreadsheets. And when you look in, or helping people connect conference calls, helping to make a task more intelligent and save people from errors. And when you look at the overall impact of that sort of micro level of AI, it could be gigantic. And it's not the big vision of AI that people have, which is the macro piece of it. So micro might be just improving the functionality of a tool like Excel, whereas macro might be, automating or improving your customer data analysis, right? Which is so to help target your markets better. So there's all different levels of this, and it's sort of, maybe it's tactical, strategic, micro, macro, but it's all in process. And even at the micro level, and again, I'm not saying this as because I'm not necessarily an unabashed fan of AI, and I think it has many, many cautions, as you say, that we have to think about. But some of the micro uses are really interesting, like that spreadsheet case, because if you add up the cost of errors in spreadsheets, even when you have really good tools like Excel, you get to a huge number every year. Or misplaced communication, the average 7 minutes it takes to get a conference room going. If AI on a micro level adds to any of that, that adds up to a big number really quickly. And naturally, the more macro business function level that a lot of us think about.
Yeah, totally agree with that. It's the little incremental things. But again, those are use cases, I think, where man is controlling machine, and that's fine, right? And I think that's where we can be pretty safe with these applications. Other areas we're going to be looking at, certainly when you get into speech applications, there is a lot of room for, we don't tolerate chatbots that are not very intelligent. So we can tell right away. So even though speech recognition from AI is about 95% accuracy level to human speech, that's a big step forward so far, but it's those extra 2 or 3 points of accuracy that make all the difference, because our ears, our minds are so attuned to human speech, we can detect the slightest thing that doesn't really cut it, that gives it away. So when AI is used transparently, it has fantastic applications. And like you say, productivity tools are I think going to be really where the big return is going to be. But when we get closer to like that 99% or plus accuracy, that's when we can trust AI a little bit more to do some of those things that are, we wouldn't normally trust to a machine. But, we all, as I mentioned before, there's give and take here, because machine learning technologies get better over time. So we have to share a little risk here and have faith that these tools will, as they become more accurate, become more valuable. There'll be more utility for these technologies. And I think that's a really exciting area. We just have to make sure the groundwork, the foundation is strong, that we can trust it, that we can keep investing in it and knowing it's going to go in the right direction. That ultimately comes back to thinking it through and having the right people making the right decisions. And so these are all topics we're going to try to touch on at this conference.
Well, the ethical conversation, I bet, is going to be super interesting. How do you organize a way of regulating and sticking to an ethical framework? It almost reminds me of biology or medicine more than technology. The way you have to think about this as this gets smarter and smarter, as an ethical framework as well as a technical framework. So it's data privacy writ large, in a few different dimensions. So it sounds like it's going to be a great set of discussions, and maybe you could tell us just before we go when and where it is planned.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So it's going to be at the Fort Lauderdale Convention Center in Florida, and it starts the 31st of January and runs through the Friday. So I believe it's Wednesday to Friday, Feb 1st. So the IT Expo itself is kind of the big event, and under that tent will be several sub-events, including Future of Work. And if the stars line up, I do have a discount code for anyone who wants a bit of savings on the registration, and just give me a shout, and I'll be happy to pass that on. But otherwise, if you're going, I will see you there. And I guess, Chris, we will continue and pick up here on our next podcast.
Great, Jon. And just if anybody who's listening wants to find out more information, what would the web address be?
Okay, yeah.
Where should they go?
Yeah, TMC site. So it'll be tmcnet.com, and you'll see their IT Expo, and then from there, all of the other sub-events, and you'll find Future of Work in that group. No problem.
Great. That sounds terrific. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay. And Chris, thank you again as usual. And we're out of time. So thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back with you very soon with another podcast. And until then, this is Jon Arnold signing off, and we'll talk to you soon.
And Chris Fine also signing off. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Jon, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, Chris and everyone, over and out.